Previously, Fate suddenly feels pain and his eye turns red. When Roxy notices it, he runs in another direction to hide it and tells her not to look at him. Then he suddenly smells that the Chimera is nearby, and the Chimera comes out, busting through the cave wall. Fate takes out his scythe and attacks directly on the core of the Chimera, but he imagines Roxy in the place of the Chimera's core. He still attacks the core and tells Roxy to stop looking at him that way. As he finishes the Chimera, he sees the mark on the body of the Chimera. Greed tells him it's the same mark that was on the salamanders. Now he is sure that someone is deliberately sending these monsters to attack Roxy. Now, Roxy and Fate stand in the middle of a crowd. The citizens watch them while Roxy draws her sword. She invites Fate to a fair duel. Fate does not understand why Roxy is angry with him. Suddenly, Miria comes forward with a charge sheet. She tells him angrily that after their return from the Great Ravine, there are many allegations against him, including violence with warriors and damaging property. She is surprised at how he can do all this alone, single-handedly. But Greed says that Miria is trying to imitate Roxy, but she does not look good at all. Fate replies to the allegations, stating that he only reacted in all those incidents when he got attacked first. At the same time, Roxy asserts that she has a responsibility to keep the citizens and their property safe, so she can't overlook the matter. Finally, Fate asks her what she wants from him. Roxy wants him to be a part of their royal army. That way, he won't indulge in casual fights and she will successfully maintain peace in the city. Fate lowers his head and refuses her offer. He shares that he cannot follow anyone. He cannot give up his freedom. It looks like Roxy knew what he would say. She tells him that he would have to live in a jail cell if he did not accept her offer or a duel. Fate draws his sword, which is still in the scabbard. Roxy surprisingly asks if he is well aware that this combat can damage his scabbard, but Fate assures her that it's a special scabbard and it won't break. The fight begins with these words. During the fight, Fate sees that Roxy is excellent at swordsmanship. Greed reminds him that he is not fighting with an ordinary fighter, this is Roxy in front of him. Fate appreciates that skill level, which she achieved after training each day. Suddenly, as Roxy sees that he is not paying full attention, she strikes the sword on his face to break the mask. Fate is surprised that Roxy wants to reveal his face. She warns that if he doesn't pay attention and only focuses on dodging the attacks, he will never be able to win the duel. To conceal his identity, Fate decides to fight seriously and use the Holy Sword technique skill, a technique that only a Holy Knight has. But it surprises everyone as to how he can use it without a Holy Sword. However, Fate shares that he already told them his scabbard is not ordinary. He integrated the magic crystal picked from the Great Ravine. The integration of magic crystal into the scabbard has made it much more powerful. Roxy is surprised, and she asks if he was a Holy Knight before. Fate assures her that he is only a fighter, and he begins his powerful attack, and it becomes clear to everyone, including Fate himself, that he is about to win. But suddenly, he looks at the gemstone in the necklace of Roxy that he gave her before, and he gets distracted. Roxy takes advantage of the moment and knocks his sword away, causing Greed to spin in the air and call Fate an idiot for not focusing on the fight. Fate admits that he lost in the duel. As Roxy wins the duel, Miria arrogantly shares that she knew Roxy could never lose. But Roxy knows that something diverted Fate's attention. She stops and asks him, but he does not want to answer that. She stops him once more to ask if he ever met Sir Aron because his footwork and fighting style so much remind her of him. Roxy tells him that Sir Aron told her he recently met an excellent warrior who was on his way to Galia. She wants to know if it was him, but Fate asks her to focus on how she will protect herself in Galia. He appreciates her concern. Suddenly, Mugen stops him and admires his fighting skills. In Ravine, how he defeated a Chimera impressed Mugen. Mugen tells him that his family had many scholars who studied these old Galian techniques. Now, his daughter is researching, and she has a lot of knowledge. Fate tells Mugen that he wants to meet his daughter Rain to know more about those artificial monsters known as chimeras. Mugen gets so angry to hear that Fate wants to meet his lovely daughter and begins running after him. On the other hand, Rain reveals her concern about the disturbance in Valorix after Hado's death. She has heard that the other heir, Raphael, has locked himself in the room. He also has the Philosopher's Stone that he achieved during his research trip. It's a stone that heals and grants power, but in return, it controls the owner's brain. She supposes that he must be planning something. On the other hand, Fate remembers what Mind told him. She advised him to aim for Domain of E. That's the only way he can reach the Divine Dragon. But Fate must not be in a hurry to get there, as he will lose control then. Suddenly, an alarm sound alerts the citizens. The Holy Knight Northern tells Roxy about a death march. An army of monsters is about to attack. The citizens run in a hurry while Roxy takes her army and reaches where they will fight those monsters. On the other hand, Fate does not have any intention of fighting alongside Royal Knights, but Greed tells him that he is seeing a surprise monster hurrying towards the battlefield from an underground way. Fate must end it before it reaches Royal Knights. Fate's Gluttony skill is starving, and his one eye is getting red. He immediately asks Greed to change into a bow. Fate simultaneously charges it with Gluttony to amplify the shot. The arrow hits the exact location where the underground monster is running. After the attack, it appears on the surface. This thing is a huge slime monster, and it has the same emblem as the other controlled monster. Fate jumps from the castle's rooftop and prepares to attack. He analyzes the crown beast's stats, and it has stamina, magic, and spirit stats all over 10 million. Greed immediately asks Fate to change him to the magic shield. At the same time, the slime monster begins showering the acid rain, and Fate saves himself with the shield. Greed tells him that Fate will die if it touches him. Greed explains that if he slices it up, it will spread the acid everywhere, which will melt Fate into sludge. So Fate decides to defeat it by evaporation. He immediately gives 10% of his stats to Greed and uses the fire enchantment skill that will evaporate the slime monster. It disappears for a while, but then it shows up again. Unfortunately, the slime monster splits itself in half and avoids the attack. It goes underground once again to reach the royal army of knights. Fate wants to end it before it heads to the royal army. Fate runs after it, but 3 small slime monsters come out from the ground to slow him down. So Fate uses his Grand Cross technique and defeats them all. Fate then finds a crevice where the slime monster will come out and prepares to destroy the core. So he immediately decides to give 20% of stats to Greed and use an attack called Charge Short Spiral Bloody Ptarmigan. Greed warns him as he has never practiced this skill. But Fate has decided, and he will use this to defeat the slime monster. He shoots an arrow right into the slime monster, causing a blast. With that, his Gluttony skill gets activated. But at the same time, Fate is shocked to see the slime monster alive, which he can't understand because he took its soul. Just behind it, Fate sees someone standing and watching him. He is wearing the same kind of skull mask that Fate uses. Fate thinks it's Eris and attacks her to expose her. But Greed tells him that Eris has a weapon of mortal sin called the Black Gun Sword, Envy. But suddenly, the slime monster comes out again to attack Fate. Greed explains that the slime monster was hit by something before, and it's some kind of magic bullet that draws out latent power. That's why the slime monster is alive without a core. But all of a sudden, it consumes Fate, and Greed thinks he is gone. A moment later, Fate comes out, and Greed realizes he has already figured out the slime monster's corrosion magic. Then Fate says that the slime won't be a match for him from now on. His Gluttony skill activates, but Greed warns him that if his stats spike too suddenly, it can drive his skill into overdrive. Fate says before that happens, he will take down Eris. He points his arrow towards Eris and launches it, but it is deflected by some kind of shield. Fate says to Greed that he has achieved stats as far as a human can go. Now he has to reach inhuman heights, the domain of E. Fate's attack failed because the opponent he is fighting has reached the domain of E, and the person is immune to anyone else's attack. Fate attacks the masked person with his sword, but that person tells him he is wasting his time. From the sound, Fate realizes that this person is not Eris. After a while, the masked man fires at Fate with multiple bullets, which he stops using the shield. After so many attacks, Fate takes some damage and falls down, thinking the opponent is much stronger than him. As the masked man comes closer to finish him off, Fate rises again and gets the power from the Gluttony skill. Both of Fate's eyes turn red, and the masked man is shocked to see that Fate has achieved the domain of E. Fate thanks the masked man for coming and fighting with him. If he didn't, he wouldn't have achieved the domain of E. Fate then attacks the masked man and ignores the slime monsters. The masked man then fires at Fate with multiple bullets, but Fate can clearly see through his attacks and avoids them all. He then creates a smoke screen. In the next attack, Fate breaks the masked man's mask. He is shocked to find out it's Northern. He uses the flute to call the divine dragon. Fate gets so worried to know that it will reach the battlefield towards Roxy in 30 seconds. Fate begins running while Northern begins attacking to stop him from reaching the battlefield. Northern fires at Fate with multiple attacks, but Greed says that Northern is just trying to buy time, so Fate just passes through everything. While on the battlefield, the Holy Knights start running away after seeing the Divine Dragon. Meanwhile, the Divine Dragon releases a powerful attack, and everyone is worried about what happened to her. Luckily, Fate stands in front of her with his shield and stops the attack. The Divine Dragon releases another powerful attack, but Fate stops the attack again. But in that moment, his mask is completely destroyed. Roxy begins to wonder if he is Fae. Fate smiles and turns to Roxy, telling her it's been a while. And that's the end of the 11th episode of Berserk of Gluttony. Please comment and let me know which anime recap you'd like to see next. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.